The show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome back. It's Quay Pacific's Talk About Strata. Stirling Faux with you, joined by Tony Gioventu from the Vancouver Province Condo Smarts column. But of course, Tony is best known as the Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia. Also a real pleasure to have Elaine McCormack back with us. Ms. McCormack is a lawyer who practices strata law with Alexander Holburn in Vancouver. And Elaine, I'd like to go back to barbecues. I mean, come on, it's June, it's the season. There's probably people listening to the program right now who are out there working the barbecue and listening at the same time. These are, we so love to do it, and we just so take for granted that anywhere in Canada you should be able to fire up the queue and cook whatever you want whenever you feel like it. In strata complexes, this is simply not the case. And in fact, barbecues are not allowed in quite a large number of strata complexes, just off limits, period, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So based on the bylaws, it could be that there's a bylaw created that says no barbecues at all on patios and balconies. There is also rules for strata corporations. So strata corporations can create rules. They're not registered in the Land Titles Office, and they can deal with use, safety, and condition of common property. Since many balconies and patios are common property, or a type of common property called limited common property, it could be that there's a rule that prohibits barbecues on patios and balconies as well. And you won't find that in the Land Title Office.
Let me stop you here, because it's a legal question that you've just sort of slipped by me here, and I don't get. How could my balcony on my expensive condo overlooking English Bay in any way be construed as common property? It's my balcony.
In many buildings, the actual balcony and patio is allocated as common property. So even though in all practicality, you have exclusive use of it.
Yeah.
It is part of the exterior of the building, and oftentimes when the developer created the strata corporation and filed the strata plan, it is legally common property.
Oh, okay. So again, something to find out about at that initial buying stage. How is my balcony defined? Let alone, can I put a barbecue on there and cook salmon whenever I feel like it? Tony, I mentioned gas lines a few minutes ago as an option, because propane tanks are quite frowned upon by a lot of strata councils. They just don't like them at all. But some of them will allow gas lines to be put into people's suites and so on. And of course, a lot of buildings have gas fireplaces and that sort of thing. So is that more popular? And do natural gas lines pose any particular problems?
Well, it depends on the kind of strata corporation that you are. So if you're a strata corporation like a townhouse complex or a bare land strata, it's going to be easier because each of the units are separately metered for their gas.
Okay.
Right? And so and it might require an alteration of the common property. Putting a gas line and a fixture in on the outside of a townhouse unit, it may require, in fact, that the strata corporation has to approve it because you're altering the exterior of the common property.
Okay.
There might be warranty issues if it's a new building. But if you're all individually metered and the gas is exclusive to each strata lot, it's an easier issue to reconcile. But think about a building where there is a single gas meter coming into the development.
Okay.
The gas is used for hot water and gas fireplaces. Everybody pays it as part of their strata fees as common expense. And all of a sudden somebody in a penthouse unit has had a gas line put in to maybe add a gas stove or a barbecue, which they're running the gas off. Well, they're running the gas that everybody's paying for. They're not the only ones paying for it. So this is a really huge bone of contention. The other issue is, of course, is that the unit itself or the building itself may not have been specifically designed from a fire safety perspective to actually run gas appliances or gas barbecues on an exterior balcony. And so especially if it's a wood frame building, that's even much more of a concern because of the combustible nature of the building and often the siding materials, the cladding that's on the building, right?
Right. Now, Elaine, if in this case somebody comes along and tries to add a gas line and essentially not pay for it, basically the gas bill still goes to everyone who lives there. Is there a you're the lawyer, you're the person who's the intermediary here. Is there not some way where I can apply to have that attached or added on to, wired into my suite along with a meter, So I can pay for whatever extra I'm going to use on my hot tub or my balcony barbecue or whatever, so as to mitigate the anger that everyone else is going to go, hey, he's putting a gas line, he's going to rip us off, he's going for free gas.
With respect to putting in a gas line, you'd need the approval of the council in order to do that.
Yep.
But putting in a meter is also different than putting in a gas line. So that will create another expense. And in fact, in my experience, a meter may be much more expensive than the gas line.
Right. So to the user who's prepared to offer some concession by way of keeping the peace, it may be an expensive offering, right?
It may be an expensive offering if it's possible to do it all, yes.
Okay.
I would suspect if you actually put this line in legally, get permission of Strata Council, and then go to try and get a gas building permit to put the line in, you're not going to get it anyhow.
Okay.
So
and these are municipal ordinances, all that sort of thing?
And provincial regulations around fire safety. Right?
Okay.
And so realistically, depending on the type of building. Now, in a Bearland strata where each person's responsible for their own buildings, their own home, that's not shown in the strata plan, it's unlikely the strata is going to restrict this. The strata might have some rules around things like barbecue smoke and hours of function and use, but for the most part, it's going to function in a fairly routine lifestyle that you are accustomed to in a single family home. Once you start moving into a townhouse development where your units are attached and they're close together, so you're exposed to smoke, or there are other fire safety risks, or you're dealing with combustible construction and those type of things,
right,
the rules kind of change. And you're no longer separated from your neighbor. You are now one together. And of course, it goes back to Elaine's earlier comment about people thinking their home is their castle.
Yeah.
But the reality in a strata is your home is not your castle. And that's the ideology change that people have to go through when they move from their 4,000 square foot home into a condo.
Now, what about the fudgers, those who would kind of try and hit the gray areas where, for example, my condo doesn't allow barbecues. So I went to Canadian Tire and I bought one of those little $30 hibachis with the propane tank. No charcoal involved here.
Right.
And it's just a little guy. It just sits in the corner and I can cook a pork chop in 10 minutes or less, and there's no mess, no smoke, no nothing. And you hear that. People looking to shave the rules a little bit here, a little bit there. Does it work out, or do neighbors still just get angry?
Normally, when you're shaving the rules outside, you're not as successful as you are if you're shaving the rules inside.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's face it.
Okay.
If it says no cats, but your cat never leaves the apartment, it's harder to deal with, right?
Right.
If your cat's wandering around the common property, it's a problem. So the little tiny hibachi, depending on whether people can see it, may or may not create a situation where the Strata Council sends you a letter saying you can't do that.
Okay. How frequently does that happen, by the way? Those little gray areas that people look to try and find to split the difference, if you will, between can't have and, well, just a little bit maybe?
I don't know how often do people run stoplights? How often do, all the other speed? How often do they do all the other things? It's
the jaywalking of Strata life.
It's the jaywalking of Strata life, really,
well done. Okay.
Exactly. It's just the nature of people not conforming to the rules. And the rules are not there as an enforcement to punishment. Strata doesn't go around, I hope, with a copy of the bylaws and rules in their hand, identifying owners that may be in violation and enforcing the bylaws. They're there as the curb, not the road. So when you get off the road and you start to conflict with other people, the Strata has something from a legislation, their own internal legislation, that they can actually intervene with.
Now, Elaine, you said that in your practice as a strata lawyer, you assist strata councils in writing bylaws. If they want to change a bylaw significantly, suppose in a building that has up to this point never allowed barbecues, but now a majority of the owners, it's an older building, there's been a significant turnover in ownership, and suddenly the new group, the majority, would like to have them. And we've checked it out with the fire marshal. It can be done under certain conditions. Now we want to change the bylaw. How tough is that?
It's not too difficult at all. It means that you need a situation where you give the owners notice of the bylaw that's being proposed, and you have the bylaw considered at a general meeting by the owners. And if 75% or more of those people in attendance want the bylaw changed and vote for it, then you have a changed bylaw as long as you register it in the Land Title Office.
Okay, and the follow-up, obviously, is that if I'm in the unhappy 25% who was virulently objecting to the notion of barbecues, let alone I smell one whiff of smoke and I'm gonna go crazy. Well, those people are going to have to move, aren't they?
Those people are going to have an issue. One of the concerns I think people have about bylaws is they think of them as static things, but it's a living, breathing document that changes, grows, and decreases with time, and you're buying into a community where the members change, and so people have to realize when they buy into a strata and they review the bylaws, those bylaws could change.
And what happens, I mean, I'm sure you've been approached by people going, look, I've lived here forever in a day, and they changed the rules. They pulled the rug out from under me, and now it's not the same place I bought into and have lived in for the last dozen or more years. So what do I do? Do you have to advise these people professionally? You better move.
It depends on the circumstances. Sometimes it depends on the type of bylaw. There are some bylaws, for instance, if you have a hot tub out on your unit, a portable hot tub, and the Strata Corporation creates a bylaw saying that there's no hot tubs, that wouldn't necessarily stop the person that's already had the hot tub from 10 years from having the hot tub.
Okay.
Some of the
There
circumstances...
could be a grandfather clause in that regard. Then.
That's right. But for some things that are more behavioral issues, like whether you can smoke on a balcony, whether you can rent your unit, those types of things are governed, and you're not necessarily grandfathered, and so then you have a real issue with it.
Smoking. A lot of people don't like to smoke indoors. Even smokers will step outside for a smoke when they need to take a break. And so clearly, if you're in a building, you're going to step out on the balcony. You're not smoking in the building. It's a non-smoking building. So you're out on the balcony. Is it still a non-smoking building if you're on the balcony?
Well, if the bylaws apply to the common property, limited common property, and the building is collective, then it's still smoking in violation of the bylaws. And the smoking's not the issue. The issue is the neighbors whose doors and windows are open, because anything that has heat associated with it is going to rise to the next level. Okay. So whether it is a barbecue or you're smoking cigarettes or any other substance, it is going to move around the complex and to other units. So it does cause a nuisance, can create a nuisance for other people in the building. You have people with serious smoke allergies,
yes,
serious health risks and health problems, and because most of our buildings in British Columbia are not air conditioned. We'll have things like heat pumps in buildings in hotter climates or climates with more diversity, but in the Lower Mainland and most of the island, we don't have air conditioning.
Right.
So our air conditioning is natural flow. We
Sure.
open doors and windows, and so things like barbecues and smoking, we're going to see more conflict over it because people want to, go outside in the evening to have a smoke before you go to bed.
Yep.
Well, what happens when 3 of your neighbors are already in bed and their windows are open and suddenly they are exposed to your cigarette smoke? Right? That's where it starts to run into some collisions and some problems with the owners.
I'm just watching Elaine's face as you're describing these circumstances. Clearly, you've had to deal with several cases that have crossed your desk with these sorts of specifics involved, Elaine.
I sure have, and when the heat happens in the summer, it all heats up because the windows are open more. So whether you're dealing with somebody who's smoking next door, whether you're dealing with a hoarder who has a whole bunch of garbage, next door, and the smells that emanate from that.
Oh, brother.
The summer doesn't help, right?
Yeah, and going back to your little barbecue,
the hibachi,
the hibachi on, a barbecue is a barbecue, whether it's electrical, propane, charcoal, whatever, it's going to produce a lot of gas. But I wrote an article back when I started writing for the province. I think it was 2003, about summertime being so hot, and a group of people who were doing candles as a project decided to use their barbecue to melt wax. Well, just think of that and fuel. It caused a fire. There was huge damage, all kinds of problems. So we want to be outdoors, but we want to take the things that we have outdoors with us, and that includes our smoking and our cooking facilities, and even things like our radios and our TVs, which are a nuisance to the neighbors. So, outdoors has some boundaries to it for sure.
This is Quay Pacific's Talk About Strata on Experts on Call on AM 650 with Tony Gioventu, Executive Director, Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia, and Strata lawyer Elaine McCormack from Alexander Holburn in Vancouver. I'm Stirling Faux. More to come after this.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.